We now come to question number 2 from the Leader of the Opposition, the Honorable Maimane.
Madam Speaker, thank you. Land is central to human existence. Land is about dignity. Land is an asset that supports life. For millennia, it has supported life, enabled the creation and the development of societies, and made economic activity possible. It is fundamental to the dignity and well-being of all our people. The dispossession of land of the indigenous people of this country is therefore what I characterize as the original sin that continues to constrain the realization of the potential of our people. The return of land to those who work it is fundamental to the transformation of our society, and it is critical if we are to improve the lives of the poor people in our country. In this the year of Nelson Mandela, we need to work together to ensure that his vision for land reform is realized. This Parliament and government should therefore be committed to the implementation of a comprehensive land reform program that corrects the historical injustices of land dispossession, provides land to the poor in both rural and urban areas, and strengthens the property rights of all South Africans, and increases agricultural production, and also, more importantly, improves and secures food security. Since 1994, the democratic government has embarked on a number of interventions to advance land reform, including restitution, redistribution, and tenure reform. While more than 3 million hectares of land was restored between 1995 and 2014, the Land Audit Report indicates that the white people in our country still own around 72% of the farms owned by individuals. Colored people in our country own 15%, and Indians 5%, and Africans, who constitute the majority of the people who live in this beautiful land, only own 4%. It was also reported that males own 72% and female only 13%. We must, given all this, and given the history that we have had, we must therefore work with urgency to significantly and sustainably accelerate the pace of land reform. Because if we do not do so, this problem that has stayed with us as a nation for hundreds of years, when the dispossession of land started in this country and reached its zenith point in 1912 when the ANC was formed, primarily to fight against land dispossession, will implode in our hands. This is the historic task that we have as South Africans, to address this question once and for all. The expropriation of land without compensation is one of the mechanisms that government will use to achieve land reform and land redistribution. As I indicated in the State of the Nation address, government will undertake a process of broad consultation to determine the modalities of the implementation of this mechanism. Following this announcement, the National Assembly passed a groundbreaking resolution on this matter, opening up an opportunity for all South Africans to participate in this critical debate. And this resolution, so we all remember, followed in the wake and in the footsteps of the resolution that was adopted by the 54th Conference of the Governing Party. It was the governing party that once again saw that we do need to speed up the process of land reform in our country. Now, this matter has been firmly placed on the national agenda, and we applaud those who have come forward with views and proposals. This process of engagement presents a great opportunity for a new, reinvigorated drive for meaningful and sustainable land reform. This, Madam Speaker, is an opportunity to assert the transformational intent of our Constitution. Our Constitution is a transformational document. It is a document that prescribes how we can transform our country and how we can heal the wounds of the past. It is an opportunity to recognize that the property clause in the Bill of Rights is a mandate for radical transformation. The property clause was never constructed for the purpose of retaining existing property relations in our country. When the property clause was conceptualized, it was conceptualized with a view of saying we need to change property relations in our country. It is a transformative instrument constructed to facilitate transfer of land and property to South Africans who had been deprived of land through colonial and apartheid policies. Now, the property clause in the Constitution specifically requires that the state should take reasonable legislative and other measures to enable the citizens of our country to gain access to land on an equitable basis. It also requires that the state should take steps to guarantee security of tenure and restitution of land to those affected by apartheid dispossession. There is a strong case, therefore, to be made that the use of expropriation without compensation in certain circumstances to advance land reform is entirely consistent with the provisions of our Constitution. It is our collective responsibility to use these provisions in our Constitution more effectively and more directly to drive land reform. We should not reduce the enormous task of land reform to a debate on expropriation without compensation. During this process of consultation and engagement, we must review the full extent of our land reform program since 1994. We must also review the real content and full meaning of our Constitution, identifying where there have been shortcomings and undertaking measures to strengthen policies and programs. One of the areas where we must acknowledge a lack of progress is with respect to processing of claims by labor tenants. We therefore must take seriously the responsibility given to government by the Supreme Court of Appeal to urgently develop a program to process outstanding claims. It is clear that we must strengthen the institutions that have been tasked with effecting land reform, ensuring that they have the capacity and resources to meet the needs of the poor. nor should we limit ourselves to agricultural land. We should take steps to address the property rights of people living in informal settlements and in the inner city buildings that have absentee landlords. We need to develop a clear strategy, a very clear strategy to dispose of unutilized publicly owned land for inclusive urban development, to bring poor people from the periphery into the center of the cities. Now, one is not often very impressed by what DA mayors do from time to time. But here is what a DA mayor said and did the other day. He said, and this is Herman Mashaba, he said, we will expropriate buildings, and in this bid, we will expand affordable accommodation. We will be willing to expropriate inner city Johannesburg buildings where he could not locate the owner, he said, or a fair selling price could not be negotiated. He would expropriate such buildings without compensation. Now, this, colleagues, begins to tell you that the resolution that was adopted here is actually a very correct resolution. And it is critical that we make this an inclusive process. We make it an inclusive process in which all South Africans are actively involved in finding just and equitable, lasting solutions. That is what we need to be doing. Now, I was most impressed, Madam Speaker, by an approach by someone who is 47 years old, who's called Mr. Codrington. He has advised white South Africans against feelings of panic about these developments, pointing out that a careful reading of the motion that was passed here on the 27th of February, amongst many other things, acknowledges that the African majority was only confined to 13% of the land, while whites owned 87% of the land. That the recent land audit, he continues, claims that black people own less than 2%, he argues, and less than 7% of urban land, and expropriation would be implemented, he says, in a manner that increases agricultural production, improves food security, and ensures that the land is returned to those from whom it was taken under colonialism and apartheid. And he goes on to say and undertake a process of consultation, so the resolution said, and Codrington then advises his white South African friends. I repeat, Codrington then advises his white South African friends that this would not be the first time the South African government has taken land without paying for it. In fact, he argues it is at least the 15th time that the government of South Africa has passed laws. Please, and he says, please do us a favor. If your ancestors did not comment about the previous 15 times the government took land, and I am guessing that, like mine, they did not, then right now would be a good time to be quiet and for a bit to listen. And he says, not forever, just for a bit. Do listen for a bit, and then calmly contribute to the conversation over the next few weeks and months in an attempt to find a solution that helps everyone. And he then goes on to list all the laws. Now, this process that we are in, Honorable Maimane, because Mr. Codrington is also addressing himself to you, who has asked this question. And he says it would be good for all of us to pause a little and listen a bit. It requires responsibility and the maturity of all leaders. We should not pretend that there is anything revolutionary in encouraging our people to illegally occupy land, nor should we resort to the kind of swart gevaar electioneering that some parties have resorted to. Let us engage in this debate as a nation. I invite all those who are angry, all those who are anxious, all those who are uncertain, and some who are excited, and those who are inspired to be part of a finding of a solution on this issue. Throughout the process, we need to work together, guided by the needs of the poor in our country, the poor who are landless. We should be guided by the understanding that our Constitution, instead of being an impediment to transformation, explicitly demands of us that we take decisive measures to redress the injustices of the past that were given rise to by dispossession. And this is also a time when we do need to sit back and listen to the stories, the heart-wrenching stories of many South Africans whose land and assets were dispossessed from them, and ask ourselves, particularly us who have land, particularly us who have assets, what would we have them do? Because right now they have nothing. This Parliament is called upon, yes, to come up with solutions. As we speak now, this Parliament has an opportunity to deal with this matter through the resolution that we have passed, by establishing the Constitutional Review Committee and also having dialogue or consultations throughout the country. Just yesterday, the court dealing with the issue of labor tenancy resolved that this matter would best be resolved through negotiations and sent the litigants back to go and negotiate. From a government point of view, we are saying the governing party, having come up with this resolution, it is now time for all of us to sit back and begin the process of seeing how best this resolution that the governing party resolved on at their conference can be put to effect. I have initiated a process where we will have a dialogue with a number of people and experts, both constitutional experts on the land issue, to begin the process of discussing this matter with a view of coming up with solutions that are going to give credence to what we resolved here on how we can use land as an opportunity to grow our economy and how we can use this opportunity to increase food production in our country. So I invite all South Africans, rather than be scared, hide your head in the sand, run away, scream and say there's a swart gevaar coming, land is going to be taken, and title deeds are in danger. I say, come to the party, let us discuss this matter and find solutions. This is the time for everyone to stop pontificating and come forward with solutions. Thank you very much.